Okay, today we're going to be looking at feudalism in the Middle Ages. For more information on this, you can check in 7.2 of your textbook. Feudalism is a hotly debated term among historians, mostly because it's a very broad and vague term that really describes a lot of different situations. So I'm going to kind of go over what has genuinely in the past been the accepted definition of feudalism. At this time in Western Europe, during the Middle Ages, kings and emperors don't have as much power to control and maintain law and order throughout their lands, especially when it comes to the foreign invasions that are occurring. So what we see is that feudalism is a political and social structure that develops out of a necessity. And that necessity really comes down to some people need services and food produced, and other people need protection. And so our societal structure at this time really lays out like this. We could actually put one more group above the king, and that would be the papacy or the pope, the Catholic Church. But for the sake of this explanation, this is all we really need. A king's land would usually be divided among nobles, the wealthy, and these lands were usually referred to as fiefs. Nobles would then divide up their land into even smaller portions and present that to what were known as vassals, sometimes called lesser lords. And then it was on these plots of land where peasants lived and worked. And so what we see is that land is the key portion being passed down the hierarchy in society. And what is passed back up from peasants to vassals and to nobles is, from the peasants, it's mostly food and food production from harvesting, but also services they can provide. And for the vassals, they are charged and tasked with providing military protection to nobles, usually in the form of a knight. Young males were chosen at reasonably young ages to, pursue becoming a knight, which would be in charge of protecting nobles. And it also worked in terms of this as well, with peasants gaining from the knighthood because they would also be given protection as well. And so what we see is it comes down to it's not a mutual exchange of things, because peasants really don't have a huge choice, but they do benefit from this in receiving some land and protection in times of need. At the center of this would be what is known as the manor, which is the area where the fief where a vassal would hold land. And on the manor would be the manor house, usually home to the vassal, the lesser lord. And they would have other things, a blacksmith where peasants would work. But most importantly would be fields for growing crops, raising animals, and other things of that. And so this manor usually contained at least one, if not multiple, villages full of peasants. And this is where they lived and worked. And oftentimes, peasants were actually given some fees for what they do, or even plots of their own land to raise food on to provide for themselves, or maybe even sell. The real key thing to remember is not only is that a bonus, being able to harvest their own food or sell their own food, but for the peasants it really comes down to, in a time of need, during some kind of invasion or raid, peasants were given protection by their vassals and ultimately by the nobles above them. And so this is how the mutual agreement between all sides work. And I say mutual, I shouldn't say that, because peasants ultimately don't have a choice. If they don't follow what the lords and the nobles want, they'll be left out to dry and have no way of protecting themselves from foreign invaders or outside invaders. And so feudalism develops because, nobles at the top need stuff done, and the one thing they can offer, the many things they can offer, the ones most important are land to be farmed, and also lived on, and protection from the foreign invasions.